Now that we've talked about confidence intervals for proportions, let's do confidence intervals for two proportions when we want to compare two proportions. When we looked at a single proportion, we used the z proportion estimate on the GeoGebra graphing calculator. This time we're going to use the z proportion 2 estimate. The information we'll need to input with this command, P1 hat and N1, so the sample proportion and sample size for the first group, sample proportion and sample size for the second group, and then the confidence level. So let's do some examples. In a group of 96 males, 18 had attempted suicide, and in a group of 123 females, 60 had attempted suicide. So we want to give a 99% confidence interval for the difference. So since we're dealing with proportions, we know we need to use the z proportion 2 estimate. We then enter in our sample proportion and sample size for the first group. So we had 18 out of 96. The second group had 60 out of 123. And finally, our confidence level was 0.99. Now that we have that, let's move over to our graphing calculator and see what we get. Here's the GeoGebra graphing calculator. We'll hit the 3 dots and go down to statistics and scroll down to z proportion 2 estimate. And we can now enter in the information. Our first sample proportion was 18 out of 96 with sample size 96. Our second group was 60 out of 123 with sample size 123. And we wanted a 99% confidence interval. So we have it's between negative 0.455 and negative 0.145. So there's a 99% chance that the true difference between males and females is between negative 45.5% and negative 14.5%. So this tells us there's a 99% chance that in this particular population, the females did attempt suicide more often, in particular because both of these numbers are negative. So this true proportion would be negative, which should indicate that the second number is bigger. A survey was performed with 400 boys and 300 girls. Of the boys, 40% said Superman was their favorite superhero, while only 30% of the girls said that. Give a 95% confidence interval for the difference. So since we're dealing with proportions here, we know we need to use the z proportion 2 estimate. We then need the sample percentage, the sample proportion, and the sample size for the boys. We know that 40% out of 400, so 0.4 and then 400. We then need the information for the girls, which would be 0.3 and 300. And then finally the confidence level, which is 0.95. Now that we have that, we can move over to our calculator and type this information in. Here's the GeoGebra graphing calculator. We'll hit the 3 dots and select the z proportion 2 estimate. The first sample proportion was 0.4 out of a sample size of 400. The second is 0.3 out of a sample size of 300, and we wanted a 0.95% confidence interval. So we have that it's between 0.029 and 0.171. So the difference is somewhere between 2.9% and 17.1%. Since these are both positive, we can definitely say the first group is larger, so out of this population and this group of kids, the boys preferred Superman more than the girls.